Have you been put off using prime lenses in the past because you think that being stuck to one focal length is going to limit what you can do? I used to be the exact same when I was learning my way around camera gear. However, now I am the complete opposite, and I will use primes at every opportunity that I can, because using a prime does have some big advantages over using a zoom lens. When we think of prime lenses, there's a few characteristics that we tend to associate with them, such as them having a much sharper image and providing a greater image quality than zoom lenses. And they also tend to have much wider apertures as well, allowing you to get an even shallower depth of field and create that nice creamy bokeh and background blur, and create an image that is often referred to as being more cinematic. And that wider aperture also allows much more light into your camera and onto your sensor, which is perfect in certain low light situations or being able to see in the dark. Maybe not actually being able to see in the dark, but there are 3 other reasons to choose using prime lenses that are guaranteed to improve your photography and encourage you to become an even more active and engaged photographer or videographer. You might think that you can just zoom or crop into an image to create a different view or angle within your photos. And while yes, sometimes that might be true, if you were instead to stick with the exact same focal length and move your feet and your position, your whole outlook on the scene changes. And that's one of the reasons that I love using prime lenses, because it makes you even more aware of what it is you are trying to capture within your frame. You start to think about every tiny little element that is going to affect that image, and it changes your whole perspective. When you're using a zoom lens, it's easy to stand in the same place and zoom in or out, thinking you're changing your perspective, when in fact you're actually not. What you're doing in that situation is effectively what you will be doing inside Lightroom at a later date when you come to crop your photos. It's not actually truly changing the perspective of the image when you do that, which is one reason why prime lenses are great, because it involves you early on at the stage of actually taking the photograph to make sure you get it right in camera, because you've got to move around and change your position. One of the main elements of photography, and the same goes for video, is deciding on everything that you want in the frame and placing it in the correct place of that frame to create a final image that is pleasing to look at. When you're using a prime lens, you have to be very intentional in doing that, because you don't have the ability to zoom in or out. But that's actually a really good thing, because it means that you start to carefully think about what it is you are trying to do and search around for different angles and different ways to create the shot that you want, and you become more involved in the creative process because of that. This does slightly link in with the first point of perspective, but if you were to have something in your frame that you didn't necessarily want in it, with a zoom lens, it's easy to just zoom past it. But with a prime lens, you are challenging yourself and challenging your creativity to think of ways around it. And maybe you might find other ways to include that thing that you didn't necessarily want in it from another angle, but then when you physically move, it actually works, and you just become more aware of all of these different elements within your scene and how you can try and fit them all together and make them work together. One of the key elements of photography is spacing, and this is the same for video, but the key is trying to give all of these different elements within your image space, and how you can do that to create a pleasing looking image. And it's not until you start physically moving your position around and stop relying on zoom that you start to become aware of that and how different things affect your image. As I mentioned earlier, prime lenses tend to have much wider apertures than zoom lenses. Typically, most zoom lenses will have a widest aperture of f2.8, whereas a prime lens might be f1.8, 1.4, 1.2. That means that you can let much more light into your camera, which is perfect in some low light situations. Maybe you're filming in a dark environment or shooting in a dark environment, and you just need the extra stop of light, which is perfect. But one of the main things that a wider aperture does is create a shallower depth of field. And what that allows you to do is experiment with your creativity, because you can play with that shallow depth of field and create nice creamy backgrounds or foregrounds, and play with your different focus points and add in other elements that draw your viewer's attention to where you want it to be. But that shallower depth of field, when it's used correctly in certain situations, can be absolute magic. It's magic. And I say if used correctly, because It's always best to use the correct aperture for the scene you are shooting. For example, if you're shooting landscapes, you're usually going to be maybe shooting around about f9, f11, something like that. But if you wanted to shoot portraits, then you might be shooting wide open. It's easy to think that you have that ability to shoot everything wide open. So I've paid for that lens that has that ability. I might as well use it, but don't. Just think carefully about what aperture it is you're using. And by mastering all of these different technical aspects of photography, as well as all of the different creative aspects that you can balance with it, that is when you will truly start to become a better photographer or videographer. The same rules apply. You'll become much more knowledgeable. Knowledgeable. Is that right? Knowledgeable. Sounds weird. You'll become much more proficient and knowledgeable about what it is you're trying to create, and you'll be able to go out and create whatever you want because you will have those skills that you've developed over time to improve your photography and video. So overall, using prime lenses, as well as all of the technical aspects that it gives you, such as the sharper image quality, it does help you to break free of your comfort zone and develop your creativity and your skills as well. And that for me is one of the main reasons I enjoy using prime lenses, as I've mentioned previously, because it does encourage you to become more engaged and proactive within your craft. Don't, however, though, be disheartened if you only have zoom lenses, because there are ways to do this with zoom lenses. Next time you go out to take some photos, for example, try shooting at one specific focal length on your zoom lens and leave it at that focal length for the whole time you're out. Maybe choose 35 or 50 mil, whatever it is you want, set your zoom lens to that and don't touch it. Just take everything you can at that focal length and put into practice some of these tips that I've spoken about. Next time you go out with your camera, give it a go, because it is a brilliant way of challenging yourself and improving your skills. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and if you want to know more about choosing lenses, I recommend you watch this video next, and I will see you there.